Hello, my name is Edwin, I'm a fantasy map maker, and today's video is about going from a large overview map to a smaller, more zoomed in detail map. And I will also show it the other way around to go from a detail map to a larger map. This all is done in Wonderdraft, and I know there are ways to do the same thing outside of Wonderdraft with Photoshop or whichever program. But we are going to stay inside Wonderdraft and do it with the tools we have here. So first we're going from large to small. Part of the reason for that is that I believe it's the better way to do mapping of your world. If you do world building or just the mapping, I prefer to go from the large scale to the small scale, to the details. If you do the other way around, if you start with the details and come up with a lot of stories and cool small things and you want to get them together in a world map, then you run the risk that it's starting to look like a patchwork, like a collection of just single things without the consistency to make it a whole. So I prefer to go first with a large overview map and then zoom into certain points and get to the details in the stories. So this is my own map for the Tales of Asnia, which is my own world setting. I'm not actively using it for anything at the moment, but I plan to do a lot. Of course, I plan always a lot, but maybe it will be a game. Maybe I will write stories for it or whatever, but at least I use it to experiment with my map making. As you can see, there are not that many details on it. There are not even any trees. There are no roads, no borders, and only very few cities and other things. I personally like it that way because then you are not stuck to anything. If you put all the details already on a world map and you go zoom in, then you kind of restrict yourself to the details you already put on that world map. I prefer to not restrict it and keep it as open as possible and only have the general layout of things. From this world map, I will, as an example, go and make a detail map of this island, Tallinn, and the Tallinn Empire. It's just, I can't even call it a continent, it's more like a big island. And then you can at least see the bigger differences. If I would just take Kurvang as an example, then the detail level, there's still a detail level difference, but it might be less visible. So we're going for this one. So to make a detail map in Wonderdraft, you go to Menu, Create Detail Map, and then you can select here a zoom level, which means that it upscales your result. So if you put it at 1, it will just take the pixels that it has here. If you put it bigger, it will become a larger canvas. Since it's a small island, I will need at least a 4 times zoom. There is a risk with the zoom level, which I will show later. If you take a very big part of your map, you don't need to zoom as much, and then like 2 will be sufficient. But for now I do 4, select an area. I'll just make sure that the whole island is within the frame and then create. And then it makes a separate Wonderdraft file. So whatever you're going to save in this new file is not saved on the world map. It's 2 completely separate things. So keep that in mind, that you can't move it back or copy paste anything back into your original map. It's a completely different file. So now we have this, and you can see the resolution is smaller than what I had with the other one, because it's such a small island, and I prefer to make my maps a little bit on a bigger canvas so that you can also print them and have them still in decent quality. So I go to a little bit of an upgrade. Then you can also see better what the issue is with this create detail map, because details that you didn't have on your world map also don't go on your detail map, which you can best see with the coastline, which gets very straight lines because it stretches out all the pixels. And for my liking, the coastline is a bit too smooth. I prefer it to be a bit rougher. Like now there are no details, like it's just a round island with nothing extraordinary or anything. So it depends a bit on how much time you have on your hands and how much time you want to spend on your maps. But for this one, I would roughen up the coastline, and that is quite the time-consuming thing. So it really depends on if it's worth to you. Like if you would roughen up the coastline, it means that you go like all around the island to do things. It can be anything. You can make it with the lower and the raise landmass tool. You can do it in which you can do some hooks or whatever you like. If you would do the brush size too big, then you have a bit of the risk that you get this like I would say it's a typical Wonderdraft coastline. That when you see a map, sometimes you can instantly see like, that's made in Wonderdraft because of this hooky coastline. So I prefer to go a little bit smaller. The roughness also not too big. If you do the roughness too big, then it also gets this typical Wonderdraft feel. And avoid that, keep them both relatively small, and you can like make sometimes add a bit of land. You can even like a pointy thing or small islands, whatever you would like, and then go all around the island. I'm not gonna do that in this video because that would be a bit too much time. So I prepared that already, and I'm gonna just open the file in which I did the whole coastline, and I don't have to save this one. So everything is the same except for the coastline is a bit, as you can see. I added some small islands which didn't make it to the world map, but it doesn't mean that there are no small islands because it's a detailed zoomed in map after all. So you can see that the whole coastline got a bit more to it. But there's more to do when you want to make a decent map out of this. Like the assets, in this case the mountains, they became way too big for my taste as well. Because if you would make a map like this and then start adding trees, then you would do very big trees, and then it's still it doesn't feel big and epic or anything. It just feels like a really tiny island with very few things on it. And one important thing about scale is that the bigger your assets, the smaller your island or continent will look like. So if you decrease, we'll select only mountains. If you decrease your mountains in size and you just add a lot of them, I'm just gonna quickly, this is not like anything, I'll put here, and these are the bigger ones, and here some smaller ones, and then you can also say like, okay, there are even some really small ranges here, some hills over here. On this island we get several, and even here. This one, it's not only the big mountains, but we also have smaller ones. And of course we can have some rolling hills. I have to zoom in a bit, otherwise you won't even see them. So if you work with the smaller assets, everything in your world or your continent or your island will feel bigger in scale, because scale is always a relative thing. You can't make a bigger canvas and expect it to be automatically a bigger world. And unfortunately, a lot of fantasy maps that you see, when people say like, I made a map of a continent, and then you look at it and you think like, looks more like an island to me. And you can avoid that by making the assets smaller. And it can be also much smaller than this. Still, I'm not saying that this is the smallest you can go. So now we did some more to the mountains. We add a little bit of hills on these islands and over here, because the more small pockets of hills and mountains you add, that will also make it all feel bigger, because you create different regions within a region. It's not just what it was just an island with two sets of mountains, one in the north, one in the south, and now we create some variations to it. Every region will get its own identity, and then this has a bit of a too green color for my liking, so I'm gonna change these mountains into something a bit more brownish to make them stand out a little bit better, or gray, or whatever color is available. So let's for the mountain part. There's of course also this huge city icon, which we can't have this big, because then the city is almost the size of an entire quarter of the continent. So for now, let's assume we do it like this, and the font of the name has to be much smaller as well. Even bigger, I would say. I don't know why then icon is red and the label black. Let's make it all black. So this already looks a lot better as well, I think. And then there's of course the rivers, which are now huge. And these are the only rivers that made it to the world map, so they are supposed to be huge. But in a detail map, we'll have also a lot of smaller rivers. So the way I usually do this is I take the width that I want, which let's say we do 5, which makes it like that. Then I erase the current river that is here. And then I place the new one. And while I click it, I do Control Z to get the old river back, so that I know that I'm placing it in the correct spot. And before the double click to finish the river, I do Control Y so it disappears again. And that way you know for sure that your river is in the correct spot. And then the ones that didn't make it on the world map, we can have some rivers feeding it. And capital Linzara is a bit here where the rivers come together. Another one over here. And then we get this kind of river system. Looks a lot better already, or at least very different. And we're gonna do the same thing here. We click for the river, build the river back, and don't forget to make it disappear before you do it. And it's there. Smaller rivers for this one as well. And then we have this one. Lake is a little bit more difficult in Wonderdraft. There's this lake brush which you can use, but I'm not a big fan of it because it doesn't really give a consistent coastline effect. Like you can see the difference with that. Like at this size, I prefer the one on the right with the sharper edge, and when it's bigger, you won't get it that sharp. It's still better than when you would use brush. Usually, I'm not that picky about the exact shape of a lake, so I'm just placing the new lakes, and together they will form somewhat of the same shape. But let's start again with the river here. So we're gonna erase what we have. So we're gonna start the river and get the old one back. And it can go through the lake because you won't see it in the lake anyway. And then it goes here to the ocean. And now that I did what I just warned you about, I double clicked without disappearing first. So I can now of course say that I did it to show you what happens when you make that mistake, but then I would be lying. I just so I'm gonna do it again, and now I'm gonna be very careful not to double click because if you do it and find some lakes, you can always go back to see how your lake was, but you cannot do that forever, so you have to kind of remember how it looked like, with a little bit of a hook on the left and a bit of a thinner part on the right. So we can make it. Yeah, that doesn't help me a lot here. This I will consider then the thinner part, and I need that bit of a hook on the left. Well, it's definitely not the same as what I had, but let's consider it good enough for now. And then here we will also add some extra rivers to feed the lake or the existing river. And there's one thing which you can do if you prefer, and that's to get rid of all the colors. Now you're working on the colors that you had on your world map, so you can kind of see where you had the green parts and the not so green parts, but you can also just have that world map as an image and every now and then go back to your original image to see it and to color it all again. I sometimes prefer it with color, sometimes without color. Doesn't really matter, but I think for now it's nicer to look at a map with some colors on it, so I'll keep them. And more rivers because we are in a detail map, and a detail map has a lot of more details such as small rivers. But this is not a map I'm actually gonna keep and use, so I also don't want to spend too much time of this video just clicking on rivers. So I think we can consider this done. And when you're at this point, you can start adding new things. This is like the mountain range that we had. This is the mountain range that we had, the capital city that we had, the lake, and some of the main rivers. And from here, it's gonna be the new things, the extra things. I'll light them up a bit more because they were a bit hard to see. So you can start adding your forests mostly on the green part, of course, in a scale which, yeah, you can do it very small. At the smallest, I have it at 10 right now. Maybe one bigger would be also fine in this case, I think. And if, oh no, it's still small one. If you add your forests, I'm not gonna do them all. You can use the brush even to get some faster results. And the forest over here. So in Zara we have a forest, and a little bit in between along the lake, because trees and fresh water are always a good combination. Here on the island and along the mountain inside. All great places for trees. And okay, again, I won't finish it to do the whole map because that would be too much time for the video, but you get the idea. We add a little bit of details everywhere. You can add more towns, and for the towns it's the same smaller symbols makes for bigger scale. So if we have Linzara here as the capital, then we can have villages all over the place. And with smaller font, like I would say maybe 24. And a variety of things. And you can fill your island or continent or whatever this may be. And that way you get a more detailed map. And you've successfully gone from a large overview map from your world map to this detail map. Then I will only quickly go on about how to go from a detail map to a larger map, which is a bit of the trickier thing, because you can copy paste the land map, but you can't copy paste the assets on it. If you would just do this and copy it, then all you have is the landmass and not the assets on it. So that's not going to work. So the way I would recommend, if you have a detail map, a zoomed in map of something and you want to make a world map, is to make your map a bit smaller. Like let's say that we halve it, the scale on, so that all the assets also go smaller, so it doesn't really look any different. And then if this part, this island would, for example, be in the bottom right corner of your world, then you turn off the scaling, you lock the right and the bottom, and you make your map bigger again. That way you add to your canvas and you have a lot of space to make new continents, which is of course not this one, but as an example, you can fill your world with new things. If you have multiple continents already worked out, then I'm afraid that Wonderdraft won't be able to help you, since you can't copy landmasses including their assets to a new map. So this works if you have only one worked out continent and want to add the rest, but not if you want to stitch together a lot of detailed maps. Then you really would have to use Photoshop or GIMP or any other program like that. I hope this explained it a bit. In another video I will go a little bit more into the scaling of maps and the perspective and how you can make your maps look more epic and big. But that would be a bit too much for this video. So this was the technical part on how to do it in Wonderdraft, and the next video will then be about scaling in general on maps. Thank you for watching and see you another time.